Hello, folks.
Is it lame?
My name is Chris, but you can call me Ganhu or Chris. It doesn't matter. This is my Halloween video, and Whoa! Did that guy just say it was Halloween? No, it's not. Hi, yeah, it's me. I'm editing this video right now. And you heard right, this was meant to come out around Halloween. It makes sense. It's about a scary movie, but that just ended up not panning out the way I wanted it to. Major spoilers for every single Scream movie. This is pretty much a video made for people who have seen them or who don't care about spoilers. I'm going to be talking about them as if you've seen them too. So, first and last spoiler warning, I'm going to give away all the details to all the movies, no matter which movie I'm on. Cool. Although, maybe I do need a mask because now the scariest thing you're gonna see this Halloween is this giant pimple right on my face. Boo. Friggin' boo, dude. Oh, boo. Originally, I was gonna do a video about scary movies and my experiences with them. I even recorded it, and I didn't like how it turned out. So instead, I'm gonna talk about Scream. While writing this video, I actually realized this is one of the only horror franchises that I've seen, all the way through. Yeah, that's right. I haven't seen a whole lot of horror movies, and that's because I'm a big pussy. Also, a lot of those franchises just have so many goddamn sequels. I don't know how many Conjuring movies there are because there are sub-franchises for The Nun and for Annabelle. 1, 2, 3. That's how we did it back in my day, and that's how I like it. This is all to say I'm not a huge horror movie person. No, the only franchises I've really kept up with are MCU movies and Star Wars movies, and I'm trying to change that. So Scream is one of the only horror franchises that I've seen all the way through, minus the TV show, but we'll talk about that later. Before we get started, just want to plug those socials. Click the link tree, join my Discord, like this video, subscribe for more, and whatever you do, don't say you'll be right back.
I'll be right back!
Hell yeah, this is the one that started it all. I watched this movie for the first time a couple years ago, and I still consider it one of my favorite horror movies to this day. There's a pretty basic formula that slashers from the 70s and 80s followed. Usually it features a lot of horny teenagers getting sliced and diced by monsters with mommy issues. Quite frequently, actually. I wonder why that part was such a prevalent feature. The one movie I've seen from that era that doesn't strictly follow the formula was Nightmare on Elm Street, which was also directed by Wes Craven. What makes both Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream special as horror films were their interest in their characters. It was the dramatic elements of both Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream that made the tension and the climax scarier. It makes a huge difference in a slasher movie when you give a shit about the characters on the other side of the knife. So this movie starts out with Drew Barrymore getting a call from a suspicious sounding guy. But we know how these things work. She'll have a harrowing encounter with the assailant, and she might even be our final girl for the movie. Oh, she died. Yeah, so Neve Campbell is actually the hero of Scream. Neve Campbell is a strong choice for a lead in this franchise. I know that Jamie Lee Curtis is the final girl, but Neve gives her a run for her money. She's excellent as Sydney. Arguably more iconic than the mask of Ghostface would be the voice of Ghostface, provided by Roger Jackson. Come to think of it, pretty much everybody's doing a pretty good job in this movie. Skeet Ulrich's got that school shooter vibe about him. Courtney Cox is pretty good as Gail Weathers too. David Arquette is trying his best.
Hello.
Okay, listen, I hate doing this, but I gotta, okay? If there's one actor that outshines everybody else in this movie, it is Matthew Lillard as Stu Macher. If you want a great example of an unhinged performance that I don't think anybody's really been able to encapsulate the way Matthew Lillard does, Scream is your movie. It makes me sad that he's kind of an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. I know on paper, if you look at the text of Scream 1 specifically, the bigger threat is obviously Billy. It's obviously Billy Loomis. It's not going to be Stu Macher. But I'd be lying if I said Matthew Lillard wasn't a huge reason why I like this movie as much as I do. He like puts it at another level. Matthew Lillard steals the show in every sense of the phrase. What I find equally parts charming and disturbing about Scream is something that we see in full display in the first film, and we only get glimpses of it in Scream 2 and 4. There's this weird, casual sense of cruelty that's not too far removed from how I've encountered it in real life. It's somewhat reflective of how small-town gossip operates in the real world, where those who engage in the discourse of a tragedy are so far removed from the tragedy itself that their behavior in comparison to the victim's actions are depicted as incredibly callous. But it doesn't just stop there. It doesn't just stop at degrading remarks about Sydney's late mother and how she potentially deserved her killing, or the paparazzi that harangue Sydney at school, or even high school kids gleefully rushing to their cars so they can go see the still warm corpse of their principal strung up at the football post. It's also the very existence of a ghost face. It's Billy's petty revenge plot and Stu's genuine excitement for the acts that he gets to commit. The closest that I've seen a film get to recreating this subtle apathy would be in Happy Death Day. Oh, and one more thing about this movie that I love, and it's kind of a weird one, and it's because I'm a pansy, but it's not super scary. That probably doesn't make sense, especially if you're a person who judges the efficacy of a horror movie based on how scary it is. But that doesn't really matter to me, and I actually don't buy into that. Personally, I don't think horror movies have to be shit your pants, sleep with the lights on scary. When it comes to horror, I think building tension and expecting release is the most important aspect. Your horror movie can have pretty basic imagery and still deliver an unsettling feeling in the audience without having to be excessively grotesque or have like nightmarish visuals. Urgency, more than anything, separates good horror from everything else. And I personally think this subversive and exciting take on the genre is a great example of that. 9 out of 10. Scream 2 is also a very good horror movie. I don't think it's quite as good as the original, but I like it, you know, it's still a solid movie. Picking up a few years later after the events of the first Scream, Sidney Prescott's in college now. But ruh-roh, Raggy, someone else has donned the ghost face mask and is terrorizing Sidney all over again. And I'll just get straight into it. One of the biggest things I don't like about the movie is who the killer ends up being, and that's something you'll be able to wager how I feel about the movie as a whole, is how I feel about the killer reveal. And I don't think we should judge the quality of a movie like Scream based on who the killer is or how good the killer reveal was. It just seems like it's often reflective of that. It just happens to be the case. Since it was pretty much the first to do it, Scream's reveal is unforgettable and pretty unbeatable because everyone thought Ghostface was one dude when he was actually two guys. Anything after that's kind of a tough act to follow. Like Mickey as the killer, you know, that makes sense. I feel like there's always got to be one guy in a Scream movie where it's like, oh yeah, well, obviously that guy, the movie buff, and he's not Randy. Like, yeah, that guy's the killer. He fucking looks like one. Like, yeah, of course it's him. And there's always that one that's a little more of a wild card, and they did it really well in the first movie, and every time they tried afterward, it felt fucking really hokey. Billy's mom is just a little too far out of left field for me. And you know, this is probably a result of the script leaks during production, causing a bunch of the movie to get rewritten multiple times. The movie probably wasn't gonna feature Billy's mom at all. Or maybe it was. Maybe Mickey wasn't gonna be one of the killers. I don't know, I clearly didn't research this part that well. We're not here talking about the movie that could have been, we're talking about the movie that is. Leave me alone. Point is, Billy's mom, it's a little bit of a stretch. But that doesn't mean I didn't have a good time. I feel like the direction Sydney's character goes through is actually more interesting in Scream 2. In the first film, you have a young girl who's already dealing with the trauma of her recently deceased mother, then becomes the target of a spree of crimes. On top of that, she deals with this in typical horror movie fashion as her function as the final girl. It makes me happy that we get to see much more of Sid throughout the franchise, as in any other franchise, she'd be pushed out into a supporting role much sooner or even killed off at this rate. right. Although Sydney seems to be doing all right for herself by the beginning of the movie, it becomes clear that she's still got some trust issues when faced with another ghost face phenomenon. One could argue that this is a little bit of a predictable route to take Sydney's character, but there are palpable consequences as a result of her lack of faith in other people. I feel like they executed this really well. There are physical repercussions of this. Prime example, Derek's fate. Like that's proof. That's the proof is right there. You can't argue with me because I'm the YouTuber here, and what I said is gospel, okay? If there's anything else in this movie that I didn't feel like worked for me really, it would be the romance between Dewey and Gale. It's just a little contrived this time. It reminds me of what they ended up doing with Frozen 2 with Anna and the other one, I don't fucking remember. They pretty much just have the same arc that their relationship does from the first movie. They're a bit contentious at the beginning, they warm up to each other, and one of them makes a sacrifice for the other one. That I don't think happened in Frozen 2. Or maybe it did, I don't know. I saw it once. It's Frozen 2. There's much more of an explicit romance this time around, and that's not to say the relationships can't have patterns that are similar to this, the off again, on again stuff. But narratively, it's pretty much just a retread. Oh, and this last thing, not a film criticism. Like, I knew this had to happen. This is more just a fanboy-ism I gotta get out there. I hate how they did Randy. Oh my god, I feel so fucking bad for Randy, dude. Why did you kill him like that? I knew he had it coming. I knew he was fucking baiting Ghostface to kill him, and then he got. But he just went out in such a brutal way. Yeah, overall, there's a lot to like in Scream 2. It could have fumbled more, and sure, it doesn't knock it out of the park like the first movie does, but it's a nice addition to the narrative. I don't think we should look at it like something that's trying to usurp the first one as much as it's a continuation of the story. 7 out of 10. Yeah, remember when I said that horror movies don't have to be judged by how scary they are to be considered good horror movies? Not only is Scream 3 the least scary, it is also the most action-packed, which is weird for a horror movie. Not a lot of them have a lot of action. That's not to say they can't have action set pieces, but when you have like a house blowing up at one point, I have to question if this is even a horror movie anymore. So I actually watched this one again recently. I was a little drunk, admittedly, but it's fine. It's not quite as bad as I remember. Like, it's marginally better than the newest Scream, but that's not saying a lot either. Apparently, Scream 3 had one of the rockiest productions out of all the Scream movies. The writer of the first 3 Scream films, Kevin Williamson, was called back to write this one, and for whatever reason, the script they ended up shooting the film with was a rushed product. And Williamson later admitted that he didn't give himself enough time to re-immerse himself with the characters, and that's how we ended up with the movie that we got. Personally, I think that's like a really brave thing to admit to, but that's also a testament to how buck wild they got with the movie. Aside from the fact that the entire tone of this Scream movie feels borderline farcical with how many action sequences there are 2 major things with the plot that make this feel way less like a Scream movie and more like Scary Movie. Sydney's inner conflict with the memory of her mom and the single killer reveal. It's no question that Maureen Prescott was important to the events of Scream. Her murder informs pretty much all of Sydney's actions throughout this series, but featuring so much of her mom as an internal demon Sydney has to face in this movie feels shoehorned in. That's not to say that the death of a loved one can still impact you years and years after their passing, but it just feels so weird to focus on this right now at this point in Sydney's journey. Hell, maybe that's because they figured that this was going to be the last Scream movie and, we need a more closure with Sydney's mom. We don't have any fucking closure for Rose McGowan's character from the first Scream. I don't even remember her name. Was it Amber? What was her fucking name? What even was her name? hate him. Jesus. In the process, they end up digging up more shit about Maureen that paints her in an uglier light than before. And yeah, I know, this movie tells us that this is the rule of the trilogy. Forget what you thought you knew, everything is off the table. Rather than actually learn something that enriches the value of the characters we've met in this series, this film awkwardly spoon feeds the audience information that actually cheapens them. Which leads me to the single killer reveal. The fact that the killer is Sydney's long-lost half-brother shouldn't be that preposterous, especially since Billy's off-screen mom from Scream 1 is one of the killers in Scream 2. But I didn't like that shit either. This is primo soap opera crap. Also, I think it's really annoying when movies do the where the fuck were you trope. Also, it's the fact that this movie is when they were gonna decide to break the two killer formula. I realized the two killer reveal in Scream 1 was meant to break the tired formula of unmasking a single monster from classic horror movies. And that if you kept doing that, you'd end up inventing a whole new formula. But you're gonna make the ghost face that can apparently take an entire barrage of bullets from downrange, then magically disappear, the Ubermensch of all ghost faces, because he wears body armor? I'm sorry, I gotta be a Randy about this. I call bullshit, okay? You would think that if the Ghostface killer was going to be a Hollywood director, someone who constantly has to coordinate with dozens of actors and crew members for his day job, he would also replicate that method for his personal revenge plot. Could you imagine if the twist was that everyone who got killed off at that rate faked their death with little Hollywood special effects magic when the grand reveal occurred? All 5 or 6 ghost faces would unmask. Oh, holy shit, that would be sick. I don't know how that would tie in with like the motivation or the relationship between the ghost faces and Sydney. I also contradicted myself from earlier. We're not here talking about the movie that could have been. We're talking about the movie that is. Leave me alone. You know, I'm going to give Kevin Williamson a pass because he wrote the first Scream. Movies are hard to write. It's okay. It's fine. I think the biggest problem I have with this reveal is also the fact that Roman was supposed to be this big orchestrator behind the events of the first Scream, which blows so hard. It's such an aggressive retcon. It diminishes the severity, the horror, and the twisted brilliancy it took Billy and Stu to accomplish what they did. To minimize that by adding in this third, unseen, unheard force that lies dormant this long, and he had like nothing to do with this other spree that happened at college, that's super underwhelming. This shit's on a perfectly good movie. I took all this time to talk about how crappy the movie is. It's a Scream movie. It's corny. It's campy. If you want to see people getting stabbed, you're gonna see it, okay? You're gonna see it here. I just don't have a lot of praises to sing for the movie, but it's nice to see these characters again. It's nice to see them go about their routine. It is a formula, but it's a familiar one. This is not the worst movie in the whole franchise. I can only think of bad things to say about it, though. So I'm gonna keep it real and say that it's a 5 out of 10. This is the part where I'm gonna stop recording, because I haven't written what I think about the other movies yet. So goodbye.